Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let's take a basic look at the Mac terminal. MACMOST is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MACMOST.com/Patreon. There you could read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. So the terminal is an app that you can find on your Mac. It's part of the system. If you want to see where it's located, just create a new Finder window and go to the Applications folder. Then go all the way down to the Utilities folder and it's in there. And you could just run it by double clicking on that, or you can use any of the normal ways to launch it like Spotlight or Launchpad. When you launch it you get a window that looks like this. You basically type into it and press return to execute commands. What you actually have here is called a shell. It's a Unix-like command line interface that allows you to interact with your Mac just by typing and reading text. There are no windows. There's nothing to click and drag. You don't even have to use your mouse or trackpad at all. While I may be tempted to think that this is what's happening under the hood of your Mac, that's not exactly true. This is just another way besides the graphical user interface to control your Mac. So when you're working in Terminal you're always at a certain location, a folder on your hard drive. You can find out where by using the command pwd. You see I'll just type that, press return, and it will show me I'm in my users folder in my home folder which is called MACMOST. You can list the files that are there with the ls command and it will show me everything that's there. Now let's compare that to the Finder. In the Finder if I go to my home folder and then I look at what's there you can see these folders that are there. That's the same thing that's listed here. I could list this another way by doing ls and then -l. The dash and then a letter or word is a modifier for the command. The command here is ls and -l is the modifier. And now it's going to list things like this. Putting each thing, in this case folders, on a separate line with information about each one. So now you can see how it's basically the same as in here. If I want to navigate around I can use cd for change directory. So cd, and if I want to go down I just type the name of the folder. So let me go down into the Documents folder. And now when I do ls-l I see a list of everything that's in there. And I can see now the graphical interface actually has the Documents and Desktop folders in iCloud. So I don't see them listed here. But if I go to my Documents folder I can see exactly the same things here. Even the one that is actually a file, not a folder. Now in addition to looking around at things you can actually do things like launch applications. So for instance to launch an application I would type open and then I would do -a and then type the name of the app. So if I wanted to do text edit I could just type text edit and it would launch the app here. It's ready for me to open a file. So the applications, they're still graphical applications with windows and all of that. But launching them is something I can do here in Terminal. And if I wanted to open a file I could use open. And instead of -a for application I just use the name of the file. So in this case test.rtf. And you can see it opens it up and it does it in its default app. I could have specified the app name by doing open-a and then the name of the app like that and then the file. And it would do the same thing in this case but I'm being very specific about which app I want to use in case there were several apps that could open that type of file. Now what happens if there's a space in the name? Spaces are very important in Terminal because they're divisions between commands and other parts of what you're trying to do. So if I were to do something like cd and then app dev you could see it can't figure out what I'm trying to do because it thinks app is the thing I'm trying to go into, not app dev. So to include spaces in names you can do one of two things. One is you can use a backslash before every space. Backslash space is a substitute for an actual real binding space between the words. The other thing you could do is you could put quotes around things. So I could do it like this and go into that folder. Now let's look at what's in here. You can see there's a bunch of different images in here. Let's say I wanted to open one of those images to take a look at it in the default app, which would be Preview. I don't have to type the entire name. I can actually use the Tab key as a shortcut. So I can do open and then start typing the name. So I'll do COL and then I'll use the Tab key and notice how it completes the entire thing. Since I started with COL there was nothing else there that I could have meant besides the Colorado Lake.jpg file. So now I could hit return and it'll open it up in Preview. If there was some ambiguity to it, like I do open CO and I do tab, it would just stay there. But underneath it would show me the problem, that there are two files this could mean. So I could put one more letter and try tab again, and then it will open that file. Now if it seems like it's going to be a lot of trouble to type out every command, well, there are a lot of ways that it's made easier for you. One thing you can do is use the up arrow to go through a history of your commands. So if I use up arrow right now, you can see the last command I issued. Another up arrow goes before that, another before that. Very often you're using the same commands over and over again. Like you might be doing something like ls-l and then going into a subdirectory, another subdirectory, moving somewhere else, and then want to do the same ls-l again. Instead of typing it, you can use up arrow a few times until you find that command and then use it again. Also, if this window ever gets a little crowded, you can always use Command K to clear it out. A lot of times you can hear about something useful you can do on your Mac involving a terminal command, and it always starts with the word defaults. What that means is that you're going to use the terminal to actually change a preference either for the system or for an application. The defaults command is just a way to get into the preferences file to either look at the settings or make a change. You could do the same thing using normal files in the Finder, but these files are usually hidden, sometimes deep in library files or application files, and they're hard to deal with. Doing it in the terminal is often the easiest way. An example would be doing this. So what this does is it's going to write to the preferences for com.apple.finder, in other words Finder's preferences, and set something called Apple Show All Files to the Boolean value true. When I issue this, nothing happens right away. If I restart the Finder, which could be done with another terminal command called kill all Finder, which will basically stop the process, and something like the Finder is automatically going to restart when it's stopped. So I do that and now the Finder restarts. Now if I bring up a Finder window like this one and I look, say, at the top level, you're going to see lots of hidden files because I've said show all files. So hidden files will be shown. I can use up arrow to go back two commands and change true to false. And now use up arrow again to use this command again. And now we'll restart the Finder and you can see all the hidden files are now hidden. So that's just one example of how you may use terminal to change a setting that doesn't have a little control, a checkbox, a pop-up menu, or anything like that in System Preferences. The setting exists, just there's no built-in way to access it outside of terminal. Another thing you do in terminal is run apps that are only command line apps. They only work here inside terminal. They don't have a graphical user interface for you to access elsewhere. An example, and a really cool one, is called top. When you do that, it's just going to show you this list that updates if the top process is running on your Mac. Now, unless you're a developer or a systems engineer, you're probably not going to be able to use this for much, but it's kind of neat to look at and see everything that changes. It's something you could bring up if the boss is coming and you want to look busy. When you're running an app like this, there are various different ways the app has for quitting it. In this case, the top app, you could be quit with just pressing the Q key. Another example would be to use the app BC, which is a calculator app. So now notice that the prompt here is different. Instead of having this here at the beginning, my user account name and the computer name, it's actually just a plain prompt. I can actually do math here. But it's a more advanced calculator, so you can do things like this, and you can do things like this. Like most things, you can just do a quick internet search to find the GNU BC app and get complete documentation for all it can do. To quit, we'll execute the command in the app, quit, and now we're back to the regular prompt. You can edit text files with commands like VI to go into the VI editor, or Nano to use the Nano editor. Lots of good ways to deal with text files. There are a ton of third-party apps that you can install from outside the App Store that add more apps to Terminal. So Terminal actually has an extensive set of preferences. There's a lot that you can do in here. You can see under General here you can use the default shell because there are different types of shells. They're kind of like different languages. The default from Catalina on is something called Z shell, and it's abbreviated ZSH. Before Catalina, the default was something called Bash, B-A-S-H, but but there are actually other ones that you could use if you're familiar with using shells. There are profiles for all the colors and the look of the terminal window. You can do things with window groups. You can do things with encodings. It's a pretty comprehensive terminal app. But it's not the only one you can use on your Mac. In fact, the App Store has a bunch of third-party terminal apps with special features that you can use. So if you're into using terminal, you don't necessarily have to settle for this terminal. You can go and do a third-party app as well. So now that you know what terminal is, the question is, what do you need it for? And the answer is that for 95% of Mac users, they never need to use terminal. It just isn't something that the typical user needs to use. But there are some users, many developers for instance, that do need to use different apps that only run in terminal. So they need to be very familiar with it. And in between that, there are people that don't necessarily need to use terminal but like to use it. If you like to just type on the keyboard but want to navigate around in the file system, moving and copying and renaming files, finding things and organizing things, you could do all of that in terminal if you know the right commands and you practice at it. And there are a lot of users that prefer that, and some users like myself that prefer kind of a hybrid. Sometimes going to the terminal for some things or when they're in a certain mood, and other times using the Finder and the graphical user interface of your Mac to do other things. So that's an introductory look at the terminal. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.